The howling wind carried a child's cry across the desolate plains of Montana Territory, 1878, where nature showed no mercy to the abandoned. Thomas Zimmerman reined in his horse, the sound piercing his weathered heart like an arrow finding its mark. Thomas dismounted and followed the weakening wails, his spurs jingling with each urgent step. Behind a cluster of rocks wrapped in a threadbare blanket lay a boy no older than 2, face red from crying, tiny fingers grasping at nothing. Beside him, a woman's body, cold and still, her final act having been to shelter her child from the elements. "Lord Almighty," Thomas whispered, kneeling beside the infant. No sign of violence marked the woman, just the hollow cheeks of starvation and the telltale pallor of fever. The winter had been harsh and the journey west unforgiving. Thomas removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair. At 32, he'd seen his share of death, but never had he encountered such a situation. He'd been riding to his ranch after delivering cattle to Helena when the cry stopped him. "Come here, little one," he murmured, gathering the boy into his arms. The child quieted immediately, perhaps sensing safety or simply too exhausted to continue. "Your mama's gone to rest, but I ain't leaving you here." Thomas wrapped the boy in his coat and mounted his horse. He would return for the mother's body, ensure she received a proper burial, but the living child needed immediate attention. The ride to his ranch took nearly 2 hours, the boy drifting between fitful sleep and bewildered stares at the stranger who carried him. Thomas's ranch, Broken Arrow, wasn't large by Montana standards, but it was well established after 8 years of backbreaking work. As he approached the main house, his foreman, Eli, spotted him and hurried forward. "Mr. Zimmerman." "We weren't expecting you till," Eli stopped short, noticing the bundle. "What you got there, boss?" "A boy," Thomas replied, dismounting carefully. "Found him out by Eagle Creek. His mother's dead." Eli's weathered face softened. "Poor little thing, what you aiming to do with him?" Thomas looked down at the child who had fallen asleep against his chest. "Get him warm and fed for now. Send one of the boys to fetch Doc Miller. And after that," Thomas hesitated only a moment, "after that I reckon he stays." Within the hour, Doc Miller arrived, examining the boy thoroughly as Thomas hovered nearby. "He's malnourished and dehydrated," the doctor explained, "but remarkably resilient. No signs of disease that I can detect." "He'll live then?" Thomas asked, relief evident in his voice. "With proper care, yes. I'd say he's about 18 months old, maybe a bit more." The doctor packed his instruments. "Do you know anything about caring for a child, Thomas?" "No," Thomas admitted, "but I aim to learn." Doc Miller smiled. "You'll need help. A child this age requires constant attention." "I'll hire someone," Thomas decided. "There must be a widow or unmarried woman in need of work." "As it happens," Doc Miller said, "Naomi Turner just arrived in town last week. She's a midwife by training, lost her position back east after her employer passed. She's been looking for work." Thomas nodded. "Send word that I'd like to speak with her. Offer fair wages and room and board." After the doctor left, Thomas sat beside the sleeping boy, studying his face. Pale skin, a spattering of freckles across his nose, and a tuft of dark hair. No resemblance to Thomas's own fair coloring, yet something about the child stirred memories of his own youth alone after his parents died in a fire, taken in by a rancher who needed extra hands more than he needed a son. "I'll do better by you," Thomas promised softly. "You won't just be a pair of hands, you'll be my son." 2 days later, Thomas heard a wagon approaching. He stepped onto the porch, the boy whom he'd taken to calling Samuel balanced on his hip. Samuel had been quiet since his arrival, watching Thomas with solemn eyes, accepting food and comfort but offering no smiles or childish babble. A slender woman in a modest blue dress descended from the wagon, thanking the driver before turning toward the house. She wore her chestnut hair in a practical bun, and her face, while not conventionally beautiful, possessed a quiet strength that Thomas immediately respected. "Mr. Zimmerman," she called, approaching with confident steps. "I'm Naomi Turner. Dr. Miller said you required assistance with a child." Thomas nodded, suddenly aware of his unshaven face and the state of his home. He tried to tidy up, but bachelor living showed in every corner. "This is Samuel," Thomas said, indicating the boy. "I found him 2 days ago. His mother had passed. I need someone who knows about children." Naomi's eyes softened as she looked at Samuel. "Hello, little one," she said gently, then returned her attention to Thomas. Dr. Miller explained the situation. "I'm experienced with children of all ages. I can provide references from Boston if you require them." "That won't be necessary," Thomas replied. "If the doc vouches for you, that's good enough. I can offer $10 a week plus room and board. It's hard country out here, Miss Turner." "I'm aware of the challenges, Mr. Zimmerman, and it's Mrs. Turner. I was widowed 3 years ago." She straightened her shoulders. "May I hold him?" Thomas hesitated, surprised by his reluctance to hand over the child he'd known for only 2 days. He carefully transferred Samuel to Naomi's arms. The boy went willingly, studying her face with the same serious expression he'd given Thomas. "He doesn't speak," Thomas explained. "Doc says he's old enough to, but he hasn't made a sound since I found him." Naomi nodded, bouncing Samuel gently. "Trauma can affect children profoundly. He needs patience and consistency." She looked around. "I'll need to know his routine and see where he sleeps." "I've been making it up as I go," Thomas admitted. "He sleeps in my room for now. I haven't had time to arrange proper quarters." "Then that's where we'll start," Naomi said decisively. "If you'll show me to my room, I can get settled, and we can establish a proper schedule for Samuel." That evening, after Naomi had transformed the spare bedroom into a nursery of sorts and bathed Samuel in a metal tub by the kitchen fire, the three sat down to supper. Thomas watched, impressed, as Naomi expertly fed the boy small bites of stew, coaxing him with gentle words. "You're good with him," Thomas observed. "Children respond to patience," Naomi replied, wiping Samuel's chin. "He's been through more than any child should endure. It will take time for him to feel secure again." "How did you come to be in Montana territory?" Thomas asked, curious about this capable woman who'd arrived so fortuitously in his life. Naomi hesitated. "After my husband died, I worked for a physician's family in Boston. When the doctor passed away last month, his widow couldn't afford to keep me on. I had a cousin in Helena who wrote about opportunities out west." She shrugged slightly. "I sold what little I had and purchased a train ticket." "That takes courage," Thomas said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Necessity often masquerades as courage, Mr. Zimmerman." She glanced up, a brief smile touching her lips. "But I've always believed in facing challenges directly." "Thomas," he corrected, "if you're to live here, we might as well dispense with formalities." "Very well, Thomas. And you may call me Naomi." Over the following weeks, a routine emerged at Broken Arrow Ranch. Naomi woke early, preparing breakfast before tending to Samuel. Thomas worked the ranch during the day, returning at noon to check on them and again in the evening. After supper, Thomas often sat with Samuel, reading from one of the few books he owned, while Naomi sewed or mended. Spring arrived, bringing new calves and longer days. Samuel began to thrive under Naomi's care, gaining weight and gradually emerging from his shell of silence. The first time he reached for Thomas, small arms extended in a clear request to be held, Thomas felt something crack inside his chest, a wall he'd built long ago. One evening in late April, as Thomas returned from checking the herd, he heard an unfamiliar sound from the porch. Laughter. Samuel's laughter. He quickened his pace, rounding the corner to find Naomi sitting on the steps with Samuel, making a rag doll dance before him. The boy's face was transformed by joy, his giggle pure and perfect. "Well, I'll be," Thomas said softly, causing them both to look up. "Thomas." Naomi exclaimed, her face flushed with pleasure. "He's been doing this all afternoon. I thought he might stop when he saw you, but as if to prove her wrong, Samuel laughed again, reaching toward Thomas. "Pa," he said clearly, the first word he'd spoken since his arrival. Thomas froze, then slowly crossed to the steps and knelt before the boy. "What did you say, son?" Pa, Samuel repeated, more insistently, small hands patting Thomas's cheeks. Thomas gathered him close, his vision blurring unexpectedly. Over Samuel's head, he met Naomi's gaze. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, a smile of such tenderness on her face that Thomas felt his heart stumble in his chest. That night, after Samuel was asleep, Thomas and Naomi sat by the fire, a comfortable silence between them until Thomas spoke. "I never thanked you properly," he said. "For what you've done for him, for us." "It's my job," Naomi replied, though her tone lacked conviction. "We both know it's more than that." Thomas studied her profile, illuminated by the firelight. At 28, Naomi carried herself with the dignity of someone who had known both joy and sorrow. In the months she'd been at Broken Arrow, he'd come to respect her intelligence and quiet strength. And somewhere along the way, respect had grown into something deeper. "I've been thinking," he continued when she didn't respond. "Samuel needs a mother, a real one, not just a hired caretaker." Naomi's hands stilled in her lap. "What are you saying, Thomas?" "I'm not a man of fancy words, Naomi, but I've come to care for you greatly." "I believe you care for us too, for Samuel, certainly, and maybe for me as well." He cleared his throat. "I'm asking if you'd consider becoming my wife, Samuel's mother in truth." Naomi looked up, her expression guarded. "Is this a proposal of convenience, Thomas, for Samuel's sake?" "It started that way," he admitted honestly. "But not anymore. I want you here because the house feels empty when you leave a room, because Samuel's laugh sounds sweeter when you're the one who caused it, because I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about cattle prices." A smile bloomed slowly across Naomi's face. "In Boston, they'd call that a declaration of love. In Montana, too," Thomas said, reaching for her hand. "Though we're less poetic about it." "I do care for Samuel," Naomi said softly. "More than I thought possible, and I care for you too, Thomas. But marriage is a serious step." "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," Thomas assured her, "just asking you to consider it." Naomi squeezed his hand. "I will." A week later, Thomas and Naomi rode into town with Samuel, ostensibly to purchase supplies but with the unspoken agreement to give Naomi a chance to see the community that would become permanently hers if she accepted Thomas's proposal. Helena was growing rapidly, the gold rush having transformed what was once a mining camp into a bustling town with wooden sidewalks and proper stores. As they tied their horses outside the general store, a man emerged from the saloon across the street, stopping abruptly when he spotted them. "Naomi," he called, striding toward them. "Naomi Turner." Thomas felt Naomi stiffen beside him. She handed Samuel to him before turning to face the approaching stranger. "Edgar," she acknowledged, her voice carefully neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." The man, expensively dressed despite the dust of travel, stopped before them, removing his hat to reveal thinning hair and a severe expression. "I've been looking for you for months. Your cousin finally divulged your whereabouts." Thomas stepped forward, Samuel secure in his arms. "And you are?" "Edgar Worthington," the man replied with barely a glance at Thomas. "Mrs. Turner's former employer, or rather my late brother was her employer." "What do you want, Edgar?" Naomi asked directly. "To bring you back to Boston, of course. My sister-in-law is struggling without you. The household is in disarray. She's authorized me to offer double your previous salary." Thomas felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Double salary, return to civilization. How could Naomi refuse such an offer? Especially when Thomas had offered her nothing but a hard life on a remote ranch. "I have obligations here," Naomi said firmly. "I'm needed." Edgar's gaze shifted to Samuel, then to Thomas, understanding dawning. "I see, you found another position." His tone suggested he understood more than was being said. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately, Naomi. I'm sure your employer would excuse us." Before Thomas could respond, Naomi stepped closer to him and Samuel, her decision clear in the set of her shoulders. "Thomas isn't my employer, Edgar. He and Samuel are my family." Edgar's eyebrows rose. "Family? You barely know these people." "Sometimes," Naomi said quietly. Family is found rather than born. She reached out, taking Samuel from Thomas and balancing him on her hip. Please give Mrs. Worthington my regards and sincere regrets. I won't be returning to Boston. Edgar looked between them, his expression hardening. This is a mistake, Naomi. What future is there for you here? A life of drudgery on some backwater ranch. You were educated for better. Thomas remained silent, allowing Naomi to make her choice without pressure, though every fiber of his being longed to defend what they were building together. I appreciate your concern, Naomi replied, her voice steady, but my answer remains the same. Edgar shook his head in disgust. Your husband would be disappointed in how far you've fallen. A flash of pain crossed Naomi's face, but her voice remained calm. My husband would want me to be happy, Edgar. I am. After Edgar departed, tension lingering in his wake, Thomas, Naomi, and Samuel completed their errands in strained silence. It wasn't until they were halfway home, the wagon rumbling along the rutted road, that Thomas finally spoke. Did you mean what you said, about us being your family? Naomi looked at him, Samuel sleeping against her shoulder. Yes, and are you happy? Happier than I've been in a very long time. She hesitated. My answer is yes, Thomas. I'll marry you if the offer still stands. Thomas pulled the wagon to a halt, turning to face her fully. You're sure? Even after being reminded of what you're giving up? Boston society, civilized living, what I'm gaining is worth far more, Naomi interrupted. A child who needs me, a good man who respects me. Land that challenges me but rewards honest work, she smiled. Besides, Boston society was never a comfortable fit for a doctor's daughter who preferred studying medicine to embroidery. Thomas leaned forward, cupping her face gently. I can't promise an easy life, Naomi. But I swear you'll never regret choosing us. I know, she whispered, and when he kissed her, Samuel still cradled between them, it felt like coming home. They married 2 weeks later in Helena's small church, with Doc Miller standing as witness and Samuel toddling down the aisle ahead of Naomi. The ceremony was simple, but as Thomas placed a ring on Naomi's finger, crafted by the blacksmith from a silver dollar, he felt a profound sense of rightness. That night, after Samuel was asleep in his new room, no longer the hastily arranged nursery, but a proper bedroom complete with a hand-carved bed, Thomas had commissioned husband and wife stood awkwardly in the doorway of what was now their shared bedroom. I've never. Thomas began, then stopped, embarrassed. Never what? Naomi asked gently. Never courted a woman properly, never been married. He ran a hand through his hair. I want to do right by you, but I'm not sure I know how. Naomi took his hand, leading him to sit beside her on the bed. Marriage isn't something you learn from a book, Thomas. We'll figure it out together, she smiled shyly. And for what it's worth, my first marriage was arranged. Edward was kind, but there was never passion between us. Thomas brushed a strand of hair from her face. And now? What do you want from this marriage? Partnership, she answered immediately. Respect, friendship. She looked down, then back up, honesty in her eyes. And yes, passion too. I want to be a true wife to you, Thomas. He kissed her then, tenderly at first, then with growing intensity as she responded eagerly. When they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with the sweet discovery of those who had found unexpected love in the most unlikely of circumstances. The months that followed were not without challenges. Summer brought drought, threatening the cattle. Naomi adapted to ranch life with determination, learning to garden in the harsh climate, to preserve food for winter, to manage a household far from the conveniences of city living. Samuel continued to thrive, his vocabulary expanding daily, his bond with both parents strengthening. In late August, as Thomas and his men prepared for the fall roundup, Naomi approached her husband with news that would change their family forever. I'm expecting, she told him as they sat on the porch watching Samuel chase fireflies in the twilight. The baby should arrive in early spring. Thomas stared at her, wonder and fear mingling in his expression. Are you certain? Yes, she smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Our family is growing. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I never thought I'd have this, he confessed. A wife, children, a real family. After my parents died, I figured I'd live and die alone. And now I can't imagine any life but this one. He looked at Samuel, who had captured a firefly and was watching it crawl across his palm with fascination. That day I found him. It changed everything. If I hadn't heard his cry. Providence, Naomi suggested. Some things are meant to be. As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, Thomas expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms with Ellie and the ranch hands' help. Naomi prepared for the baby, sewing tiny garments in the evenings while Samuel played at her feet. Their family's story spread through the surrounding community: the rancher who found an orphaned boy, the Boston widow who came west, the family forged from tragedy and chance. Other ranchers' wives began to call, bringing preserves and advice. The isolation that had marked Thomas's early years at Broken Arrow gradually gave way to a sense of belonging. Winter arrived early that year, harsh and unforgiving. Thomas worried about Naomi's pregnancy, insisting she rest more than she deemed necessary, fretting when supplies ran low during a particularly fierce blizzard. But Naomi's strength never faltered, her calm presence a steady anchor for both Thomas and Samuel. On a clear February morning, with snow blanketing the land in pristine white, Naomi's labor began. Thomas scentily racing for Doc Miller, but the baby, a daughter they named Elizabeth, arrived before the doctor, delivered by Thomas's own trembling hands under Naomi's calm instruction. "She's perfect," Thomas whispered, cradling his newborn daughter while Samuel peered curiously at his sister from beside the bed. "Baby?" Samuel asked, now 3 years old and speaking in complete sentences. "Yes, your sister," Naomi confirmed, exhausted but radiant. "Elizabeth." Samuel nodded solemnly. "I help take care of her, you will," Thomas assured him, sitting beside Naomi so both children were within their embrace. "We all will. That's what families do." As spring returned to Montana territory, bringing new calves and fresh green to the prairie, the Zimmerman family settled into their expanded roles. Thomas found himself marveling at how completely his life had transformed in just over a year, from solitary rancher to husband and father of 2. One evening, as Thomas returned from checking the herd, he paused at the sight before him. Naomi in the garden, Elizabeth sleeping in a basket nearby, while Samuel helped by carrying water in a small bucket, more splashing on his boots than reaching the plants. The scene struck Thomas with such profound gratitude that he had to steady himself against the fence post. This was his family, his home, built not from blood ties but from choice and circumstance and love. "Pa," Samuel spotted him, abandoning his bucket to race across the yard. "I helping Ma with the garden," Thomas swept him up, tossing him high before catching him securely. "I can see that, son, doing a fine job too." Naomi looked up, shading her eyes against the setting sun. The year of ranch life had tanned her once pale skin, added calluses to her hands, but the simple contentment in her expression was worth more than any comfort she'd left behind. "You're home early," she observed as he approached, Samuel now perched on his shoulders. "Couldn't stay away," Thomas replied, bending to kiss her. "Missed my family too much." Naomi touched his face, a gesture of understanding. "Sometimes I still can't believe how we came to be here together." Thomas glanced at Samuel, remembering the desperate cry that had stopped him on his journey, the tiny form wrapped in a threadbare blanket. "I was just passing through," he said quietly, "if I'd taken another route that day." "But you didn't," Naomi reminded him. "You heard him, you stopped. You brought him home." Elizabeth stirred in her basket, and Naomi lifted her, cradling her against her shoulder. Thomas set Samuel down, and the boy immediately began showing his father the sprouting seedlings, chattering excitedly about helping his mother plant them. Thomas watched his son for Samuel, was his son in every way that mattered, and thought about the woman who had died alone on the prairie, her final act one of love, placing her child where he might be found. He silently thanked her for the gift she'd unknowingly given him. Not just a son, but the catalyst that had opened his heart to love, to family, to the complete life he now led. "I'm thinking we should expand the garden next year," Naomi was saying. "Maybe plant some fruit trees too. They take years to bear, but we're not going anywhere." "No," Thomas agreed, gathering his family close as the Montana sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues. "We're home, all of us, for good." As night fell over Broken Arrow Ranch, the light from the farmhouse windows glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of the family within, brought together by chance, cemented by choice, and bound forever by love that had bloomed in the wildest of circumstances, on the untamed frontier of the American West.